Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ARML mid-season show. This is Korak. I'm joined by Ennui. Ennui, how are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I literally jumped out of my car, ran inside to get on stream after the Cincinnati tournament. So I'm coming in full hyped from a weekend of mahjong.
Well, if you jumped out of the car, I hope you at least turned it off first.
Oh shoot, give me 1 second. I'll be right back.
Anyway, so we're going to go over all the divisions, a quick thing to say about IRMC and the aforementioned Cincinnati tournament, which took place this weekend. But I think it's about time to just jump in. So, of course, the first division is B3. This is the new entrant division, and there are no demotions. There are only promotions. You're going for everything you can, and you can see a huge spread, whole different set of players, different skills, different talents, different strengths, different weaknesses, and all sorts of very interesting play. We'll have a couple of clips in a bit. But the first thing that jumps out at me are some of those average wins. We have a 7,000 and a whole bunch over 6,000. Even there, a couple they're sitting kind of down there with like Amari with 6850 average. That's ridiculous. You hope you're doing a lot better than that, but a lot of it just you see very much at the top of the division here. One of the important things is the deal-in percentage. You see so many of these in the 10, 11, 12, 13. As you get down towards this list, you're starting to see 15, 17, even some 20s. And there are more players in this division. It's absolutely huge. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to do something to pull away from the pack. And no matter what you do, you just need to keep delivering. Now we have the 7 guaranteed positions. There may be more because promotions out of B3 depend on who is going to stay and stay active in B2. Some will inevitably turn over. Some will just take the season off. Some will decide that they didn't really want to continue. So you'd like to just guarantee your spot in the top 7, but I believe this division is 34 deep. So there are a lot of things you have to do to get up there. Ennui, did you get
Yeah,
your
and it,
car turned off?
yeah, I was able to make it back just in time to hear your analysis of B3. And I do think something that we always like to point out, like more like a little bit deeper than just the win rates and the deal-in rates, is the average values of both too. Like Amari's great 68.5 that you pointed out is kind of, since it's accompanied by the high deal-in rate, that's why the results aren't as positive as, say, like Charlie, who has 2,000 less points on average, but is also winning almost twice as many hands, like getting
Well,
getting that EV value up.
well, you see that EV, and we've talked about this before. This is kind of ARML's preferred statistic. It's win rate times average win amount minus deal in rate times average deal in amount. And it's not a hard rule of if your EV is higher, you're going to do more, but it correlates pretty strongly. You can see that here. You see a few of these that aren't just clearly in order, but you see all the 1,000 pluses are in the top 6, clearly in the promotion situation. And just looking at all these players, you have drastically different call, Ricci, and overall participation rate, which is the call plus the Ricci rate. And different play styles, they're all working. You can be relatively passive. You see the 46.6, you be very aggressive. You see Aaron with a 70.6 involved in almost every hand and not that far out of guaranteed promotion spots.
And that's also part of what makes, I mean, there's a sense in which playing in a division like B3 can almost be harder than playing in a division like A1. In A1, like we've seen these players play all 4 seasons. You kind of know what to expect. They're fairly consistent, but in B3, you're playing players who you've maybe never even heard of before. You have no idea what they're bringing to the table, no idea what strategy they're going to use. And like even these stats, since they're only from 12 games and not from past seasons as well, for a lot of these players, some of them have been in the ARML since its conception, but for a lot of these players, you just have nothing to go on. So that can make these games very tricky, and also has made watching them incredibly exciting, which I think will be obvious once we take a look at the couple of clips we have.
Last thing before I go to the clips, I'd like to special shout out to I there sitting at a 25.75 deal in average with an 8.5 deal in rate. That is some great defense.
Yeah, that's absolutely bonkers. I am incredibly jealous of that personally.
All right, I think we have a couple clips.
The one tile wait for your pair, everything else revealed.
I mean, it is. What is this? I guess it does upgrade to Mongon, but I normally, if I was going to do that, it'd have to be at least like Hanemon, but it's still an upgrade.
I mean, imagine discarding the 5P in there and switching to the 9-mon wait. How just absolutely brutal would that be?
That would be pretty brutal, but it's also like a hell weight, so it's like, yeah, someone would definitely throw it, but just one of those left.
You can see Kevin on the left really thinking about this South. There's 2 already discarded, but and this is the power of the Hanakatanki. This is Tenpai on the right for James though. Discard a 6 though, and you're waiting 4-7.
Oh, this was a Hanakatanki!
Oh my god!
Haku Honitsu. Absolutely massive.
The one.
And you see from there, there was a lot of commentary. Oh, you can't take the Hanakatanki. And just sumo. That is one of our ARML mottos, one we say all the time. The game's a lot easier when you draw the ties you need, and getting up to that Mongon's a huge swing here. You're sitting in South 3, you're a little scared. Second place is getting close. You're not safe at 53.5, but that's going to be a huge boost.
Yeah, and these huge wins, like, because it's often talked about, if you're already at a very high score like Amari is here with 53.5, do you push really wild hands like that? And well, it affects the overall standings for the entire course of the league. So just bailing whenever you start winning and taking like small firsts isn't going to quite be enough if you want to promote, especially in leagues as massive as B3.
Yeah, because again, we have 7 promotions out of over 30 players. It's ridiculously hard to really set yourself apart. You don't have to just win, you have to run up that score. And here you see that dealer here taking the 4,000 hit and getting a 37,000 second. And that sometimes might not even be good enough. It's hard to state how difficult this division is if it ends up staying at 7 cutoffs. But let's head back to the second clip, I believe.
This table is required to give.
1 mon, still in the wall. 5 pin, still in the wall. 4 so,
there it is.
Still in the wall.
There's Tenpai. Calling Ricci.
And these players are good defensive players. There's a very real chance we see a Tsumo here.
Suanko, Dora 2.
Let's go. Shaw across the table. That's Tenpai.
Oh! There it is! Possible for the Suanko!
We got our Yakuman finally! You called it, Tucker!
We've been teased all night! This was like our 4th Suanko attempt!
On the Dora!
It finally comes together! That one was especially fun to watch on stream. I mean, in that game, up until this point, what you don't see in all the hands before this is I think there were there was like 1 or 2 Suanko Tenpais, a couple more Suanko Ishantens. There was someone who like almost got a Kokoshi. Like, Yakumans had just been kind of hovering around that entire game. And then finally in South 3, Dave just comes in and absolutely blasts off on the Dora, no less.
Yeah, we've talked about just sumo. Well, it doesn't get more just sumo than that. But just generally, Dave, is a long-time community member in Mahjong, set up the USPML, has been heavily involved in WRC, streams every once in a while with Gemma, who basically runs WRC. So he's been involved all the way, been around even longer than I have, and I'm considered one of the old men of the Mahjong community. And Dave just was stuck, had you can see from his stats, had 3 fourths, and was kind of looking at another one here. It's South 3 in 4th place. And now with that goes from potentially sitting around -40 or -50. He's now right around that cutoff line. So one hand changes the entire situation.
Oh yeah, and like that, and talking about tables with wild kind of variation in them, you've got Dave on the left who got the Akuman, and then the person we were sitting behind was actually a sub who I believe is 8 Dan in Tenho. So like
that's an Australian player, Jay. I've done some commentary for the Australian Riichi Mahjong Association, and he's also been around for a while. But I guarantee you, is B3. I'm not that worried about it. Of course, this will happen in B3. You will get big hands. But similarly, you're saying, I'm just going to have a B3 game. I'm not that worried about it. And then an 8 Dan sub drops in on you and go, uh-oh.
That kind of changes the dynamic a little bit.
But no, this is a huge result for Dave. And can we go back to the statistics now?
Yeah, because actually we can see on the left there, Dave was at 12th before that game, and that launched him all the way up to 8th. So it went from being like a good distance away from the promotion zone to now is, right in the middle of things.
Again, was 4th in that game, so would have dropped. Probably would have been around that ±0 range, and is now definitely in position to promote out of B3. So a whole lot of action's gone on. B3 is just so cutthroat at times. Again, because you have such a deep division, so few promotions, it's flat out scary a lot of the times you have to play, because you have to play so well. You have to separate yourself from the pack. Winning is not necessarily good enough. You have to win big and lose small.
And I think with that, we can move on to another pretty wacky division at times. We've seen some cool stuff in B2 as well, though I don't think we got any clips for it this time.
No, we openly admit, I will admit to have slacking. We haven't called as many B2 games we want to. We will be focusing on that heavily in the next few weeks. But the first thing that jumps out at me is Jonathan. Now, Jonathan at the very top came into ARML and got some hazing because he was a sub and he got thrown right into the wolves in A1 and would have ended up in the demotion area, but in that season, who wouldn't have been? And it seems to have paid off for him.
Oh yeah, I mean, 30% win rate and a 10% deal in. I mean, the only person with stats that are at all similar to that here, or at least that good, is Kevin, who has a very similar spread. And I mean, just really those 3 at the top, Jonathan, Sam, and Brian, with Kevin and Jeff really not that far behind, are trying to pull away with things. But I feel B2 has a very like bimodal kind of feel to it. Not a lot of people at the ±0. But a lot of people hanging out at the bottom in the demotion range, and really like even down to 8th. Like that's not too far of a gap, even to be surmounted in 1 session, let alone 3.
Right. And another thing I'm looking at is just seeing the play styles. We talked about it in B3, but it's the same in B2. You have aggressive players like Kevin and Jonathan at the top. On the other side, you have Jeff with a 43.2% participation rate, one of the lowest in the league, and still sitting up there in 5th.
A participation rate after my own heart.
Yeah, not the way I like it. In fact, when we get to my stats, I'll whine about how I haven't been able to do anything. But regardless, you can see just different ways things are done. And Sam here with that 6 wins, when you're winning half your games, you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, and on the other side of things, there's only 2 players in B2 who haven't lost a game. And across all the divisions, there's less than 10 people total that have yet to lose a game. Those Jonathan and Alfred both benefiting from the 0 losses. mean, Jonathan has half the wins of Sam, but when you're not coming in last, that really helps your average point gain.
Yeah, something about this division, you see some really high win rates. So many people over 25, and it's hard to state how hard it is to do that. When you think, oh, there are 4 players, you get 25% of the wins. Well, no, because occasionally things will go to draws. The average win rate is going to be in the 21 to 22% of the overall hands in general. You see here the league average is 21.9. So you're taking control, you're winning hands, some with aggression, some just sitting back and finishing hands effectively. There are so many different ways to play it, and they're all working to some extent. Now, on the other end, you're going to see some people that are sitting there down towards the bottom, and the question is, okay, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing wrong? Are you just unlucky? Is there something in your game? There's always something wrong in your game. Even if you're sitting on the top of A1, there are things to analyze. There's things to look at. See, what am I doing? Did I read the situation? I'm a huge fan of every single game. You need to be going after those laws and asking why. What you do channel here in the ARML Discord is very useful for people wondering, wait, what is this? What should I be thinking about? And what is the context of some of the plays? Because a lot of the times you'll be like, hey, wait, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, that's one of the best ways to learn about new strategies or a very like kind of esoteric aspect of efficiency, because the What Would You Do channel isn't just a place where you can analyze what is going on in your hand. You're getting advice from lots of different people with lots of different perspectives who have all put together decades of mahjong experience and mahjong learning. So it's a very, very good way to kind of open source learn mahjong. And then from them, someone maybe just mentions Nakasuji, and now you can kind of go down a rabbit hole and learn about it and look into it and like try to notice it in your games. And bit by bit, you add tools to your toolbox that will allow you to really start to excel.
Right, and I know there's a lot of fear from some players that may be on the newer side of, oh no, we're going to have A1 people saying, hey, this is completely wrong. You assume I understand this game. I don't know this game that much better than you do. I just fake my way through a lot of it.
Yeah, and everybody's always really nice and polite to other people. Like, really, the only time you're ever going to see someone being extremely negative typically is going to be at themselves more often than not.
Oh, yeah. Mahjong is so much a mental game. I mean, we can look at these stats. You see Gaetano and Michael with very high win averages, but it's just Michael with that 30% deal-in rate. That's ouch. That you can definitely fix on. That's one where just some study should definitely help there. You can bring that down. Even if you're drawing tiles over and over, that's something you can work on, can get better on. It can definitely help you with it. It's something to learn to move forward with. You see some of the rest of these. Robert has decent stats in terms of your average win, average deal-in, but an 11.3% win rate is a little rough, but it comes down to, are you putting your fishy together? Are you building your hands? Are you calling when you're supposed to? All that stuff ties in together, and it's about a process. It's not results. It's a process of becoming a better player.
Yeah, and that's, I think, very, very important, especially like for the mental game aspect, because if you spend too much time thinking just about the results, that's often when you start to get into sort of the mahjong death spiral.
Yeah, the number one rule is always have fun. It just is. All right. Well, I don't think we have any clips, so let's head to B1.
And we'll start to see even more familiar names here as we're moving up these charts. It's like, I've seen all of these people on stream at least twice. Like, I've played against these people now. It's very comfortable getting to see all these familiar names. Actually, several of these people were at the Cincy tournament this weekend.
Yeah, these are familiar names to me. There are only a couple that I don't immediately go, I know exactly who that is. And some that I didn't know before ARML that I definitely am familiar with their play now. Of course, the first one is Andrew, who is sitting at a ridiculous 31.6% win rate and a EV over 1,300.
Yeah, that is absolutely buck wild. And the plus 191.9 for the score really shows how that pays off.
Yeah, and that's just it. Even with a couple seconds, you're still sitting around plus 200 in an excellent position to promote up towards A2. And just putting together the solid Mahjong, and even go down this list. People in the middle of this division are averaging 6,600, 7,200 on their wins. Just that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Sichuan and Christian, we've actually seen a lot of their games. I feel like Sichuan especially happened to be at several tables that got commentated on last season and was always doing really well. But you can kind of see here, like, okay, when you have that 17.4% win rate, but you are getting the big hands, like the call rate isn't particularly low. Sometimes you just don't have flow. And as long as you can stay in the middle when things aren't going well, that makes it a lot easier to climb the rankings as soon as you do start to get the tiles that you need.
Yeah, and that's something that's very underrated by a lot of players is you not only need to take advantage when you have the advantage, but you have to mitigate your losses when it's just not coming together. And it's going to happen. Mahjong is still fundamentally largely luck. You can manipulate around the edges, but the question is, how do you handle the good luck? How do you handle the bad luck? And can you keep that mental game on task?
Yeah, and with that, like, it'll be interesting to see these players who are in the demotion zone currently, because those are, like, again, really familiar names down there. Cruz, we've talked about frequently as being one of the more defensive players in the league. The past 2 seasons has had single-digit deal-in rates. And here has an average deal-in of 3,100. As soon as Cruz is able to start winning hands, you would expect Cruz to start moving upward. Anya, who has a very good aggressive play style that we've been watching for several seasons. And then Mike McLeod, who is a very well-known figure in the Mahjong community at large, even has his own meme. Like, these are people who we really expect, like, are very familiar that mental game and the experience that comes with playing it for longer is really gonna benefit.
Yeah, I picked Mike McLeod to win this division in the preseason show, and he's not quite doing so well. The 20% deal-in rate, that is rough, but can probably manage. The issue is dealing into those really expensive hands. You have a 6,200 average deal-in rate. You'd better keep that rate low. And that's kind of where it's coming together, is you have to pull in all those aspects of your game to stay in, because every division is competitive, but you especially start seeing it now as you get towards B1, A2, A1. But even down, I talked about B3 a while ago, you have so many people there that an average performance won't do much for you. But here you just look at these stats, and nothing's safe. And I'll say again, I don't think Mike McLeod will stay where he is, but I didn't expect him to be there. I think he can pull it together. Clinton is another one that I played against. Clinton, he was a sub in one of my earlier matches, I think in the inaugural beta league, and he played very well. And it's the same kind of story. Those big deal in averages it's not just what should I push or when should I push a lot of the time. And sometimes you're going to be in Ricci and deal in, and there's nothing you can do about it.
As angering and tilting as that can be, that's, again, you just kind of have to maybe have a short memory for that time and just kind of move on. But one of the morals of the stories I guess we could pick up here is maybe it's just, Mahjong is competitive. All of these divisions are incredibly difficult to get mobility in, especially when there's such a narrow window to get into the promotion range. Like, getting top 5 in any division is going to be difficult no matter who is in it.
Yeah, even with average luck. Okay, well, unless you're drastically overperforming everyone else, that means you're going to be sitting 10th or 11th. This isn't going to do you any good. Another thing I'm going to talk about is Edwin, of course, the founder and organizer of the ARML with a 8.9% reaching rate. I have to yell at him a bit. He's doing okay. You see the 4 wins, 4-2, 4-2, pretty good average overall negative score, but an 8.9 reaching rate.
And a 50.6% call rate. I didn't know. I thought over half of his hands were Chitoy. So I don't know how half of his hands can be open.
New Chitoy strategies.
Otama.
There you go. Call the pawn on the same tile twice, and that's 3 pairs, right? But you can see even here, Pio expects to do pretty well sitting here. Not really in the emotion zone, but kind of sitting around there. And just look at the stats is, again, what ends up floating towards the top? It's that low deal-in rate. There are a few that have relative low. They're sitting kind of low. But other than Joe, every one of those top 5s has a relatively low deal-in rate. You see the average in this division is 14.4. So that's where it's coming from. Is you have people that are sitting there at 10 or 11, or Patrick with that 5.5.
Yeah,
And
5.5 is 5.5 is getting into the realm of absurdity.
Well, the question is with anything, can you keep it up? And a lot of the times, 5.5, even if you're playing quote unquote perfect defense, it'll generally be on that 8 to 9% range. So just realize that there's been an advantage on your end, but you've played it well and are sitting there in an excellent position, 3rd overall in a division where 5 go up, and you capitalize on the good luck. Let's say that is half the game. It's mitigating the bad stuff and taking care of the good stuff. And if you've done that, you will promote. It's just so hard to. There's so much talent. The divisions are deep. The play is incredibly competitive. And again, we talk about in every division, different play styles. You don't have to always be involved in every single hand. And we just talked about Edwin sitting there on the even, where kind of around the plus minus 0 with that ridiculous call rate and low reach rate. On the other hand, you have John sitting in 7th with a 27% call rate and a 37% reach rate.
I don't know how 37% reachy is possible. Like, I don't know if 37% of my hands get to Tempai. Like, the idea of being able to reachy 37% of your hands, like, that is absolutely wild.
That is very impressive. And then we see Sarah just kind of sitting there casually, not in the promotion zone yet, but just kind of on the edge, and also a relatively passive player, much more akin to you than me, but is putting it together. And 1/4, as long as you get 3 wins in 1/4, you're going to be in the positives and climbing. If you can keep that up, Sarah will go up to A2.
Oh yeah, and Sarah also is a player who is very capable of just kind of exploding in a game. Can push that aggressive streak when she has good tiles. So plus 43 is a pretty good position for her specifically.
Yeah, when I've analyzed Sarah's games, they kind of feel like in previous seasons they kind of felt like how I was playing, just a little more cautious. You may say, hey, wait, a Korek's a wild maniac. You'll see my win rate is generally not that high. It's so much of the average win rate. And Sarah hasn't really had those ginormous hands, because I think was sitting around 6,000 or 6,500 in every other season with the average wins. Fell down a little bit. That's why not in the promotion zone yet, but I would expect that to change just based on how she tends to play.
Yeah, and you made a comment earlier about, telling people that they don't have to be involved in every hand. And I have a list of names of people in A2 that I would like for you to give this information to, just as a personal favor from me when we get there.
Well, there are certainly, you'll see this again, every single division. there are multiple ways to play the game. And we had relatively passive players. And then I remember there's Amy and me last season, and we were both sitting around a 46% call rate.
Yeah,
But
and that would be almost the top of even B1 here. Though Edwin is the only person higher than that, and then PO is right at it.
yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to do it, but the fundamentals are simply win a lot on average, don't deal in a lot on average. And again, that EV tells the story. There are a couple who are a place or two off where they may theoretically be, but in general, it's holding up. And really, until you drop all the way down to like Anya, down in the demotion zone, everyone's sitting at that 250 plus, and you can definitely recover from that. And you see
Oh
that
yeah.
kind of the overall standing. That's kind of the problem. Is that's why there's that big drop from 16 to 17. Is even with that very ridiculously low win rate from Cruz, the deal in average is so small that it's managed to mitigate some of the losses with a sub
Total bigs.
3,200 deal in average. But overall, you got to win more than 12.4% if you want to stay out of that emotion zone. But I'll say, if you have a 12.4% win rate and you're still only at minus 68.4, you're doing something right.
Yeah, I feel like B1, if there was one division that I think could just have absolutely absurd amounts of movement top to bottom, B1 might be the one I put my finger on. So
Yeah, when
like
I'm looking
this
at
could
these
be a volatile
positions,
one.
these stats, and the way that so many of these players play, and these stats don't represent how I generally think of them. So a lot of that is how are you playing the hand you were dealt? And second of all, have you gotten kind of in the other players' heads a bit where they know you're going to play a certain way? Or are you going to adjust? And we've kind of seen the same thing in A1 specifically earlier season, but it didn't really trickle down. And it feels like it definitely has this season.
And that's going to kind of be a result of just everyone getting to know each other better, which in the end is going to be very good for the American Mahjong community to help us all get stronger kind of together.
Yeah. Now we're kind of at the midway point, so I'm going to take a bit of a switch and talk about a couple other events. Of course, we had the Cincinnati tournament this last weekend. I believe we have some final stats over there. Once
Oh
it gets
yeah,
set
this
up, yeah, Aaron, who's in A1, winning the whole thing, Q or Aldwin, who's in A2, pulling in third. Nathaniel, who, of course, is our fellow commentator in seventh, and Mike McLeod in sixth. So, bunch of representation there from ARML. They came out and they performed pretty well.
Yeah, and to paint the backdrop a little bit too, like Aaron and Mike just absolutely dominated the qualifiers. Mike ended up first after the qualifiers, and Aaron ended up second. And obviously, Aaron continued to take that into semifinals and finals as well. But there was a lot of good stuff going on. Nathaniel actually was third in the qualifiers. So all three of the top three of qualifiers were from ARML. All in different ways. Mike had some massive wins. Aaron was very consistently getting big wins. Nathaniel had, I believe, 5 seconds and one first. So really just kind of like tortoised his way up, but it was a very exciting weekend of Mahjong. Max did an absolutely incredible job of organizing everything, of running it. Hats off to him for making everything run so smoothly, and to the whole Cincinnati Mahjong group in general, making everything work, even with like a couple of very small hiccups. I mean, it was an absolute blast, and I think everyone there had a good time.
All right. And you were at that tournament. I couldn't make it because I had other obligations, but great representation for ARML. And as you see, winner is Aaron, who is in A1, which we'll get to in a bit. But that's not the only thing that's happened the last couple of weeks. We also had the IORMC, which is the International Online Riichi Mahjong Competition. It's a multi-nation tournament that's been running for around 10 years now. And the US has slowly gotten better and better. And for the fourth straight year, managed to qualify for the team tournament finals, which is the top 4 nations. And I believe we are the only country that has done that so far.
That's what I keep hearing, and Edwin has shared the spreadsheets that prove it several times.
Yeah, there's a lot of depth, and it's been different players. Of course, we had Claire and I were both on it a few years ago, went back to back on it. And now we have more players. You know, Nathaniel and Jeremy were both on the team that qualified this year. And these are kind of rough because it's based out of Korea, South Korea. So there were some time zone issues, especially with people having to fight with the Cincinnati tournament and traveling. It was a bit of a mess having a tournament where you had to show up at 4 in the morning local time, 2 on the West Coast, 5 on the East Coast. So it was a bit rough. And then one of the teams didn't have their players show up on time. So everyone's already short on sleep. And then that dragged out. Wasn't particularly fun for the players involved, unfortunately. But they did end up pulling out third. So congratulations to them. And on the individual side, Jeremy, who is behind the stream running it, was in the top 8 overall. So big congrats there as well.
And before that, like on the qualifier day on the scramble round, Jeremy actually qualified number 1 overall, was on top of the entire IORMC after the first day of qualifiers. So a really, really strong performance from Jeremy there.
Yeah,
and also a shout out to
4 firsts and a third. So that's going to get you towards the top a lot of the time.
That'll take you places. And also a shout out. The other 2 players for the US team this year were William and Jessa, both of whom we saw in lower divisions.
Yes, I believe they're both in B3.
Yeah, Williams they're both brand new. So yes, they're
yeah, that's
in
what
B3.
I thought. All right. Well, now we covered that, so I guess we move on to A2.
Home sweet home.
Well, it wasn't last season, but you managed to fight your way back.
I missed it so much. I started at A2, I immediately fell out of it, and I crawled my way back in, and now I'm just trying to hang on for dear life.
So we have, this is A2, and you can see widespread. The obvious thing is Haru with that 32.6 win percent. Just kind of dominating the league. And if you can win almost 1 in 3 hands, you're going to do quite well, especially if you can tie it in with an 11.3% deal-in rate and a low deal-in average.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. I'm particularly interested to see how Haru's games go the rest of this season, because Haru is well known for being a very aggressive player who can win a lot. Not typically known for her defense, mostly just because she's, pushing. She's pushing good hands, and that does tend to lead to more than 11% deal-ins. So it'll be interesting seeing her, like this week, her, Claire, Dustin, and Rachel, which is 80% of the promotion zone of A2, are at a table together, and every single one of those players are absolute bombs. Rachel, well known for being explosive. Claire can do the same thing. Dustin, a little bit more reserved, but when he builds a hand, he builds it huge. Typically, he's had less luck this season doing that, but he is well known for that. I believe he had the highest average score in the Beta League season overall. So
well,
it'll be really interesting to see how that shakes out.
Well, Claire was kind of an interesting story. A lot of people expected her to make it up towards A1, and a couple seasons ago followed the same pattern you did and dropped to B1 in one of the biggest surprises of the season, and then fought back and is back towards A2 and looks headed towards A1 now at that 176.7. Of course, Claire is well known as the leader of Richinomi, a club out of New York City. and is running with great stats. 25% win, almost 26, 9% deal-in rate, a really low deal-in average, just top EV in the entire division. Is very solid play all around.
Oh yeah, she's been doing things have really been working out for her this season. She had a lot of horrible luck last season that kind of landed her in that demotion zone. I mean, I was at the final demotion table with her, and like nothing she did worked. No matter how good it was, no matter how much sense it made. So it's good to see things working out for her this season. And I mean, all the way we've talked mostly about the top 5 so far. I mean, A2 is deep. I mean, you might see in 9th and 13th there. Those are 2 of the past league champions. Eric, who won the very first season, the Beta League season, and then Huang, who won the, let's see, what comes after winter? I always forget. Spring? Yeah. Huang won the spring in an absolutely massive faction, but like over a person in second place, and did it all in the last round. So there's a lot going on in A2 here.
Yeah, I was definitely going to go that way as well. That some of these players that have been sitting at A1 dropped down and even won the league, generally with kind of volatile style that I much more associate with Huang than Eric, but just sitting there kind of in the not necessarily safe range, but just basically sitting there lurking. Hoping to get a chance to climb up. And of course, if the top 4 beat up on each other, there's your chance to capitalize. But similarly for everyone else in that situation, Oliver, who got demoted from A1 last season, has a chance to come back. And I believe Andre was the other demotion from A1 and is sitting barely above that cut line, but safe for now.
Yeah, both Andre and Eric kind of toying around in that close to demotion zone where it's so tense whenever you're on the edge of either side, but demotion especially, because it's like, it's not just the tension, there's also kind of a sense of dread. You're like, even, it's okay to demote. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's going to happen to most people like over the course of time, but that doesn't mean it feels good. And so fighting against that and still playing your best Mahjong, Eric and Andre will definitely be good examples to watch as kind of models for how to continue playing your best, since they have, you know, a ton of experience. And Aldwin, who came top 4 at the Cincy Open and is kind of a pillar of the entire American Mahjong community as a whole, always trying to bring people together. Also a good example of that. Took a hiatus last season, came back in A2 this season after the summer break. And is also going to need to claw his way out of that demotion zone there.
Yeah, lots going on here. I talked about in the preseason show, some of the most volatile players are NA2. And you see them here. Rachel had a pretty good season, and I think you're going to come with Ada, who hasn't really pulled it together. And we know they're both capable of just running through. I said about both of them. Either of them could dominate A1. Either of them could demote. And I stick by that statement. That they have wild swings, both of them. And Rachel has definitely put the defense together this season, something you've kind of been missing in the previous ones, and is someone to be a little scared of.
Oh yeah,
I'm that 26% win rate and cut that deal-in rate a bit. That's someone who will go up if she can keep it up.
Yeah, I am personally glad that I have already faced Rachel this season. One of the players that I specifically would like to dodge.
Well, also Lucas, who was in A1, got cut in that really rough situation a couple seasons ago where the cut line was ±0, ended up something at -26. And demoting out of A1, that season was just particularly brutal. Is sitting there kind of waiting in a position, had a chance to remote to A1 season, put it together in the last few Hanshan. And so here you have a chance again, 12 games away, but unfortunately a little more towards the demotion side for now. Certainly capable of putting it together and getting up there, though.
Well, and then there's players we've talked a lot about players who have kind of been at the top and come down, or started in A2, went down and went up. But an example of the other side of things is Alec, who started, I believe, in B2, and then has been absolutely running things every single season. I think has come in first or second by like hundreds of points. Both of the previous 2 seasons in the divisions that they were in, and now getting up into A2, things getting more competitive. I mean, Alec only has 1 loss. That 1 loss
When I'm
was
looking
a
at
pretty
these
huge
stats,
one.
I'm wondering if there were some games missed.
Oh,
Because those penalties
there's
would
only
be
10.
that would explain it. Yeah. And if you were at minus 30.6, you're at a very different position. But if you had to take a couple 30-point penalties, that'll eat at you pretty quickly.
Oh, that probably is it. And sometimes it can't be helped. Like life happens, and Mahjong is only a game after all. But that is another reason why it's important. Set alarms, set reminders. You definitely don't want to miss a game for a silly reason.
Okay, I have been confirmed. It was a minus 60 from 2 missed games.
Okay, that
So
makes
yeah,
that
makes a
sense.
lot more sense. But
But
you
even
put yourself
still,
kind of behind the 8 ball now, and you don't have to immediately make your games. You just have to tell us so we can reschedule them. That's kind of the important thing, because we understand life can get in the way, and we don't want people to get demoted because of that. But just let us know. That's always the rule. Let's see. Anything else here? I haven't seen much from Matthew. I have not paid that much attention to Matthew's game, but has put together some pretty strong stats.
Matthew is an incredible player. Matthew is someone who they're not as active like in Discords, which is how I end up getting to know everybody. But Matthew, I believe, is like 4 or 5 Don, like like a close to 1900, if not over. So someone who is like tested at least in Tenho, and obviously has made it up to A2. In playing against Matthew last week, I can say is a very good player, very steady, like kind of straight down the middle, and does it super, super well, which is a way that Loose in A1, who we will definitely be talking about here in a minute, can also be seen as. Like she plays straight down the middle and does it super, super well and succeeds. And I kind of view Matthew as being a similar player. Very good at taking advantage of potentialities when they arrive for him. Oh, right. And the next clip that we have is of Matthew winning. And he kind of got a little bit of an assist from Dustin, who kind of forgot to count for a second.
Might be a little bit concerned about what Dustin's trying to put together, but
Oh, I don't like that play at all.
That gives
This gives the last draw to Michael. No, I hate this.
Oh no!
Oh, that's why! Oh my goodness, Ricci, Sumo, Haite, Dora 3, no Ura, but that is 12,000, and that is why you don't con there.
The Haite makes it a Hanuman.
Oh yeah, I remember this. I think I was watching this on the stream. I was kind of confused by changing the draw order like that, especially the con. You give the extra Dora here and Haite, and definitely comes back to bite Dustin. The only winning tiles are left were the 7-pin, and draw is one of them. Isn't actually affected by the Condor, but that could have been a lot worse for Dustin. A great win there for Matthew putting that together. Anytime you get a Hanemon, especially a Haite Hanemon, feels great.
Yeah, and Matthew went on to get like 60,000 points in this game. So this was a good start for him. And I remember this as well. Actually, like, as soon as that happened, I sent a message in the Discord, like in the group Discord to Dustin, saying, what on earth, in more colorful language, was that? Like, what did you just do? And he said, honestly, just miscounted. Just straight up a miscount. And that happens sometimes, especially online. Like little tiny drops of focus where you just miss one thing, or you don't quite count right, or you just miss one number, can have pretty huge consequences in Mahjong overall. And we see that here. But also the mental game comments that we were making earlier, what Dustin said after that was, hey, I'm not really that tilted by this. It was funny. Like, it is wild that he got the high tay after the con. Like, even if it is a bad move strategically, it's still incredibly unlikely to happen, just mathematically. So the fact that it happens, like, with everything going on, Dustin got a lot of amusement out of, which is telling to experienced players, good mindset, will keep you going. Even with a pretty big last from this Hanchan, Dustin's still 5th overall or actually 4th in the standings now.
Well, I wish I had that level of temperance, because if that happens to me, I go completely tilted. But
In my
regardless, I
chair.
think that's about all we have from A2. So let's head to A1.
Ah, the big one. Trying to decide the final seat at the league championship match for the end of the season.
And of course, here the first thing jumps out is Luce just kind of running away. Had a pretty good chance at winning last season, couldn't close it in the end. Of course, Kenyon, being last dealer, had a bunch of advantages in that match, did manage to win it, and is not really continuing that this season, though.
Oh yeah, there's been some jokes tossed around about there being a league champion curse, which maybe is just the curse of Mahjong, but yeah, Kenyon's like really hit a rough go of it, just not really winning hands and dealing in a bit too much.
You can see from the fall statistics, 3-3-3-3. So, like, in theory, you should be at +0, right?
That I
And
mean,
just it's
if all you have
all
is
about
placement.
timing and the spread. And Kenyon's got it's been rough on Kenyon.
And this is actually I don't know if we have a way specifically to look up this data point, but looking at that -106 is another time to like remind how important the floating UMA in the ARML is. Like if 3 people are above 30,000, then first, second, and third all get positive points, and the person in fourth ends up with a -20 instead of a -15. Similarly, on the other end, if only one person is above 30,000, they get 20 points, so it's a huge first, and all 3 of the people below are going to end up with negative scores. And so a lot of times when you're seeing things that don't add up like this, it is either because of like one just really, really massive round, either in the positive or the negative, or because a lot of their seconds or thirds are tending to be on the wrong side of the floating UMA.
Well, even so, even if you're on the wrong side, it's because it's some bad force. And the first, you didn't really rack up that many points. But that's Mahjong. The other thing that jumps out at me in the list is my own score, the 6-9. Nice. Uh, but overall, one thing I look at this and I go 52% participation rate. Boy, no wonder I feel I've been passive.
Yeah, almost everyone in A1 is higher. Although a notable exception to that rule is Beechin, who Beechin, an absolutely amazing player, very, very defensive and very good at playing around other people. If you want a kind of crash course on Mawashi, just watch any of Beechin's games.
Yeah, you look at that spread, 27.3 winning percentage and only an 8.4% deal-in rate. So a huge spread there. But speaking of spread, you drop down to Steve, who's known for that type of spread. I look at those statistics and go, 20% win, I guess it's a little low, but that's a huge average win. And the less than 8% deal-in rate, you'd think Steve doing a lot better, but it's about timing on everything. If you get those 3/3, that'll definitely mitigate some of those better hands.
And I mean, like we've brought up EV a couple times. 819 is the 3rd highest EV in A1.
Steve definitely been a solid player every season, and not really in any demotion range, but feeling a little bit out of range to win the league unless Luce kind of crashes and burns. And even then, you still have Max and Bishan and Minko way up there. We'll need to put some games together in order to be able to make a challenge up there. And we mentioned earlier Aaron, who is the 7th seed in A1 right now, won the Cincinnati tournament.
And here, like most note has a 15.7% deal in, but when the average score of the hands you're dealing into is only 3,400, 60% really isn't that bad. Like that's okay. If you're dealing into small hands, you're typically pushing your own hands, which is going to end up paying off more often than not.
Yeah, and then on the bottom side, we have a few of our fellow commentators in Nathaniel and Jeremy in pretty rough positions, especially Jeremy, who's running the stream right now, used all of his luck in RRMC. And you see the win rate at 15.3 and the dealing rate at 15. So even if you're winning a little bit more, that's going to be really hard to keep up with. And 7/4, that's hard to come back from if you only have 16 games in. Has already even played another session. So probably going to need at least plus 60 in the remaining 2 sessions each in order to be back, but escaped certain death last season. And we'll have a chance to do it again here. Nathaniel in a much better position also was facing certain doom up until the very last Hanchan and managed to escape there. But you look at the same kind of thing. Not a huge spread between that win and deal in, where you have an 18% win and the 13% deal in, which honestly, most places would get you, you'd figure, probably around plus minus 0. It's not good enough in A1.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard to state how cutthroat A1 gets at times.
Yeah, and you could see that in Nathaniel's rankings as well. 1 first, 5 seconds. So you're not turning those seconds into first, not capitalizing on them with more wins. 1/3, 5/4. Like you're not climbing up the one position you need to when you're in those situations. It's gonna be kind of rough. I mean, the first season of A1 was incredibly cutthroat for demotions because the cut line ended up being what, 9? Negative 9?
Yeah,
0.9.
0.9 is, I was the last one in at 0.9.
And here it's going to be cutthroat for a completely different reason, where 15th is at negative 30 currently and 16th is at negative 92. So at minimum, so Kaz, the person who's the closest here, at minimum is going to have to gain 60 more points. Now, Max did remind us in the chat that there is one game that is not showing here. I don't remember how it affects. Well, actually, I guess we could just look it up real quick because it's up to date in the Discord. Yeah, so Beechin actually is in second with plus 95. Let's see, other people at that table. Kaz is at 17th with negative 105, so took a small last in the one Hanchan that's not listed. Max dropped 40 in the Hanchan that's not listed, so is in fourth at plus 65.7. And the other player at that table would have been Kenyon, who is actually at minus 69.7. So also nice for Kenyon. And is the kind of person bridging the gap between 15th and the rest of the demotion zone. Has gotten on her way to climbing out there.
Yeah, and I'll say right now, I would not expect Kenyon to stay down there. Definitely one of the most consistent players in RML every season. Was in the first season championship, and of course won last season. Here we have the updated stats. For whatever reason, the database updating got there. Anyway, so this is what they actually are. You see, one table has already played their next session worth of games, and you just see here that cut line is going to be scary if Kenyon climbs, and I expect Kenyon to climb. The question is, will that pack kind of in the middle, involving Zhu all the way down to me and maybe Simon, will any of those drop and then potentially open up a bit of a buffer?
Yeah, and this is
really no one's safe. And last thing I'll mention is there is a name you probably don't recognize, and that's Kathy, formerly Crow, changed names, and okay, but that's who that is.
Yeah, and she's doing very well. She's done a good job. She absolutely ran A2 last season and has been performing well in A1. Just needs a couple more things to work out in general here. And, anything is kind of still within range of Luce, although Luce has just been putting on a show. Like, she's over 60 up on second right now. She had a shot last season and she's right at the top again. I mean, Luce, only 1/4, has the least fourths in A1, tied for the most firsts. It has just been hard for people to overtake her on a consistent basis.
Well, you see the top winning percentage in all of A1 and the second lowest deal in average in A1. You put those together and you just see from the EV. Well, they say that's generally the story. You may be off by a few places, but in general, it tells what's really going on. And Lewis is just rolling at this point. But I mean, you just see, again, we say it every division. There are multiple different players. Though. Look at the difference between Bishan and Minko. Minko with that
Yeah.
33% Ricci rate. And Bishan just basically playing pretty passively and getting the wins that are given and not dealing in. And that's going to put you in a great position.
Oh yeah, and I guess part of like a kind of a hidden stat here, because with Bishan's 27.3%, you'd probably be asking yourself, okay, well, how is a 27.3% win rate possible when you only have a 41% participation rate? And that's because Dama is kind of hidden in these stats. Dama is Damaton. It's like its own definition here. Bishan wins a lot with Dama, and that's why that win rate is so high, despite the participation being not quite the lowest, the second lowest in A1.
And Dama, of course, being closed hands without Ricci. So yeah, I even took a couple this season as well, even though I despise taking Damas, but it's just because that's how the tiles came. And my win percentage now is up to 18.7. It was way lower than that before my last session. I think I was sitting around 13 or 15%. It was really rough. Had to get what you can and escape. That's especially if you're not up towards like the Zilong or above. The goal is always just escape. As every game in A1 is cutthroat, and I'm just getting scared because this is giving me the same kind of feelings that first season of A1 was, where you had to be positive to stay in A1.
Yeah, and that's part of the issue with A1 is there's other divisions you can look. You're like, okay, this person, like the way they play, if they get unlucky, like they could drop. But really in A1, you look at every single name and you're like, oh yeah, that person could go higher. That person could go higher. Oh wait, yeah, that person could go higher too. And that's what makes A1 so rough, is that all 20 of these players could go plus 100 in the next 12 Hanchan. Like everyone's capable of it.
Every one
it's
of
just
these
a matter
players
of who
could go
will.
100, in their next set. Like forget the rest of the season. That any of these players have the capability of getting a plus 100 over their next 4 games.
The question is just, who are they going to take those points from? And that's what makes this second half of the season so exciting. Like the first half of the season, everything feels like, oh, there's so much more time left. There's so much more time left. You lost a couple of games, but you can make up for it. Like, oh, you've got big wins, but you need to hold on to it. There's a lot going on. But this is the turning point. This fourth session is when every single game starts weighing more and more and more and more. And in A1, where everything is so competitive, it's gonna feel that a lot harder. And it is just going to be absolutely electric seeing what happens as this last month and a half of the ARML year kind of come to completion.
And there are a couple other things I just like to say about the overall A1 division. Those are the dealing rates, almost 2% lower than the average. That if you want to win, a lot of the time you're going to have to sumo, and you're not going to have people making those reckless pushes as often. If they're pushing, there's usually a very good reason. And similarly, the EV, a ridiculous difference. The average, 200 above league average in terms of how much people are making versus how much they're dealing in. That is an enormous separation.
Yeah, it can be kind of hard to really picture what that EV means since it's not a term you're used to, but almost think of it as on average every single player in A1 is winning 200 more points per hand than every other player in the ARML. And that 458 league average includes all of the A1 players. So if you removed A1 from the league and calculated the stats just for the rest of the league, you likely would have 400 or lower as the average EV for the league. So really, like 250-ish more points on average than every single other person in the ARML. Like that is why things are just so absolutely rough here.
All right. Well, I think that's about it for today. So, as always, this is when we do the obligatory plugs. The YouTube, follow us on here on Twitch, American Orichi on Twitter, the website americanorichi.org. You can sign up now for the spring season, and we'll be getting closer towards the end.
Winter. Hold on. Don't skip the snowy months,
hold on.
Korak.
But it is winter.
Snow. No, I need snow days. I need that. It's important for my mental health.
Well, it feels like winter where I am, so that's right. The seasons are always weird. But yeah, that would be the winter season coming up. And so, any closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts would be sure to tune in as often as you can. Like really, even though we're so far into the ARML, in the grand scheme of things, this is still a new organization. So joining now, you're still kind of on the ground floor of things to some extent. Like it's still a great time to join. There's a high likelihood that with the amount of signups we have next season, there's a possibility that we'll end up having to create a C1, which is really exciting, just us continuing to grow, but we'll see. There's no guarantees of that yet. You could just see the pink names in the Discord as new people keep joining. But these next 3 sessions, these next 6 weeks are going to be absolutely friggin' incredible. And so I would encourage you to come out more and more so that you can see just all of the absolute nonsense that Mahjong decides we need to suffer through, because it is going to be fun.
All right, then. I don't really have anything special to add, so for Korak, along with Ennui, this is the American Orichi Mahjong League. Looking forward to a strong second half of the season. If you're at that promotion line, keep the fight up, and if you're at that demotion line, you're not done yet. There's a long way to go. Take care, everyone.